The first signs appeared in late autumn, when the maple trees lining our estate had begun shedding their crimson leaves across our perfectly manicured lawn. I remember standing at my home office window, watching Emma scrape frost off her car windshield before heading to another emergency council meeting. The morning light caught her wedding ring, and for a moment, I felt an inexplicable heaviness in my chest. The Thompson name carried weight in Cedar Grove. As the founder of Thompson Technologies, I transformed our sleepy Midwest city into a burgeoning tech hub. Emma had been there since the beginning, when I was just Nathan Thompson, a hopeful entrepreneur with big dreams and an even bigger student loan debt. She'd believed in me then, or at least I thought she had. 15 years of marriage had given us everything society deemed essential for happiness: a sprawling Victorian mansion, influence in local politics, invitations to every significant social event. But lately, something had shifted in the careful choreography of our lives. Emma's laughter, once genuine and unreserved, now seemed measured, calculated. Her touches felt mechanical, as if she was following a script rather than acting on instinct. "Another late meeting?" I called out from the doorway, pulling my cashmere sweater tighter against the morning chill. Emma's response came with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The city budget review is coming up. Mayor Collins needs all hands on deck." She adjusted her pearls, the ones I'd given her on our 10th anniversary. "Don't wait up tonight, darling. These sessions can run long." I watched her BMW disappear down our private driveway, remembering simpler times when we'd share coffee and conversation each morning. Now our interactions felt like business transactions, polite, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. That evening, as I sat alone in our vast dining room, picking at the meal our housekeeper had prepared, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was unraveling. The silence of our empty homes seemed to whisper warnings I wasn't yet ready to hear. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a story that would shake the foundations of everything I'd built, everything I believed in, and everything I thought I knew about the woman who shared my name. My concerns might have remained dormant had it not been for the annual Cedar Grove Technology Summit. As the city's primary benefactor, I was expected to deliver the keynote speech, with Emma traditionally handling the diplomatic aspects of the event. She'd always excelled at navigating the complex web of local politics and business relationships that kept our city thriving. That evening, I stood at the podium, discussing innovation and community growth, when I caught sight of her in the crowd. She wasn't watching me as she always had in years past, with that mixture of pride and affection that had once made my heart swell. Instead, her attention was fixed on her phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. Mayor James Collins, seated at the VIP table nearby, seemed equally distracted by his own device. Later, at the reception, I noticed how Emma's body language shifted whenever the mayor entered her orbit. It wasn't anything obvious, just a subtle straightening of her spine, a slight tilt of her head, the way her fingers would absently twist her wedding ring. Small details that might seem insignificant in isolation, but together formed a pattern I couldn't quite decipher. "The speech was wonderful, darling," she said, touching my arm with practiced affection. Her perfume, usually a delicate floral scent, was different, something deeper, more sensual. Mayor Collins, was just saying how fortunate Cedar Grove is to have you." I watched her glass of champagne tremble slightly as she spoke his name, a minute tell that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. "I didn't realize you and the mayor were on a first-name basis," I remarked, keeping my tone light despite the knot forming in my stomach. Emma's laugh was pitch-perfect, rehearsed. "Oh, Nathan, don't be silly. We've all known each other for years. Besides, formality seems pointless after spending so many hours in budget meetings." That night, as we drove home in separate cars, she'd insisted on taking her own, citing an early morning meeting the next day. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every gesture, every seemingly innocent comment from the past few months. The weight of unspoken words hung between us like a heavy fog, obscuring the truth I wasn't yet ready to face. In our bedroom, I noticed her side of the closet had been reorganized. Designer dresses I'd never seen before hung among her usual conservative attire. A receipt from La Perla peeked out from her purse, Strange, considering she'd always preferred simple, practical underwear from department stores. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying the subtle changes in my wife's behavior like a detective examining evidence. The woman sleeping beside me felt like a stranger wearing a familiar face, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to discover just how deep the rabbit hole went. The following weeks brought a parade of small revelations, each one adding another crack to the foundation of my certainty. I found myself doing things that would have seemed beneath me just months ago, checking our shared calendar more frequently, noting the increasing number of private appointments that filled Emma's schedule. One evening, as autumn rain drummed against our bedroom windows, I discovered a small notebook tucked behind her jewelry box while looking for my grandmother's pearl cufflinks she'd borrowed. The pages contained carefully documented fitness routines, diet plans, and, most tellingly, a list of high-end boutiques and beauty treatments. Emma had never shown such interest in intensive self-improvement before. She'd always carried herself with natural confidence that had first drawn me to her at Stanford. The last page held something that made my blood run cold, a hastily scribbled note about offshore account procedures and property laws in our state. Below it, a phone number I didn't recognize, followed by initials. JC. I remembered our early days, when we'd share dreams over cheap takeout in our tiny apartment. Emma had been my rock during the tumultuous launch of Thompson Technologies, spending countless nights helping me perfect pitch decks and financial projections. Now, with a net worth exceeding 9 figures, I couldn't help but wonder if success had poisoned what we built. "I'm thinking of redecorating the house," she announced over dinner that evening, barely looking up from her phone. "Mayor Collins mentioned an interior designer who did wonders with the City Hall renovation. Perhaps we could use a change." The casual mention of his name sent a familiar chill down my spine. "The house seems fine to me," I replied, studying her reaction. "Though I've noticed you've been making quite a few changes lately." Her eyes met mine then, a flash of something, fear? Defiance? Crossing her face before being replaced by her now usual mask of polite detachment. "What do you mean by that, Nathan?" "The new clothes, the different perfume, the personal trainer I saw leaving the house last week." I kept my voice steady, remembering the advice of Sun Tzu: supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Emma's laugh held a brittle edge. "Is it a crime to want to take better care of myself? I'm not getting any younger, and as your wife, I have an image to maintain." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine in a gesture that once would have felt intimate but now seemed calculated. "You've been working so much lately, darling. Perhaps you're seeing problems that don't exist." Later that night, I stood in my home office, gazing out at the city lights twinkling below our hillside estate. A text notification lit up my phone, a message from Marcus Chin, my head of security, confirming he'd begun the discreet surveillance I'd requested. 20 years of building a tech empire had taught me one crucial lesson: trust your instincts, but verify everything. What Marcus would uncover in the coming weeks would shake the very foundations of Cedar Grove's power structure, and my understanding of the woman I'd loved for 15 years. The revelation came from an unexpected source: our housekeeper, Maria. She'd served our family faithfully for 12 years, her quiet presence a constant thread in the tapestry of our lives. That morning I found her hands trembling as she arranged flowers in the foyer, her usually composed demeanor cracked by obvious distress. "Mr. Thompson," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the stairs. "There's something you need to know. Mrs. Thompson, she's not attending council meetings when she says she is." My heart stammered in my chest, but before I could press for details, Maria continued. "Last week, I saw her meeting with a woman I didn't recognize. They were in the garden house, the one you never use. The stranger, she was taking photos of documents, many documents. And Mrs. Thompson was crying." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. In 15 years of marriage, I'd never seen Emma cry, not when we lost our first pregnancy, not when her father passed away. She'd always maintained that iron control that made her such a formidable partner in both business and life. Acting on instinct, I waited until Emma left for another meeting, before making my way to the garden house. The small Victorian structure had been a wedding gift to Emma, meant to be her personal retreat, but she'd shown little interest in it over the years. Now, as I approached, I noticed fresh footprints in the damp earth despite the gardener's 2-week vacation. Inside, everything appeared untouched at first glance. The antique furniture gathered dust, the air hung stale and unused. But when I ran my fingers along the spines of the old books on the shelves, one volume caught my attention. The Art of War. My personal copy that had gone missing months ago. Inside, I found handwritten notes in unfamiliar handwriting, outlining what appeared to be a complex strategy. But it wasn't about business or politics. It was a detailed plan to protect Emma. The notes spoke of gathering evidence, securing witnesses, and building a case. But against whom? The last page held a shocking detail. NT's empire built on stolen patents? Check Richardson lawsuit from 2010. My hands grew cold. The Richardson lawsuit had been settled quietly, buried under layers of NDAs and legal maneuvering. Only 3 people knew the full truth about those patents: myself, my former partner who died in a sailing accident 5 years ago, and a noise behind me made me turn. There stood Maria, her face ashen. "Mr. Thompson, there's more," she said, her voice barely audible. "The woman who meets Mrs. Thompson, she's not just any lawyer. She's Mayor Collins' ex-wife." The pieces began shifting in my mind, forming a picture I hadn't expected. Emma wasn't having an affair, she was building a case. But was she preparing to destroy me, or trying to protect me from something bigger? And why was the mayor's ex-wife involved in this elaborate dance of deception? As I stood in the dusty garden house, surrounded by the ghosts of unspoken truths, one thing became crystal clear: nothing in Cedar Grove was what it seemed. That night sleep eluded me like a mocking specter. The master bedroom felt cavernous, Emma's peaceful breathing beside me a symphony of contradictions. I studied her face in the ghostly light filtering through our window. The face I'd woken up to for 15 years now seemed like a beautiful cipher, each familiar line holding secrets I couldn't decode. The Richardson lawsuit. The memory of it burned in my consciousness like a hot coal. Peter Richardson had been brilliant but unstable, his accusations of patent theft coming at a crucial moment in Thompson Technologies' early days. The truth of that situation was far more complex than the public records showed, wrapped in layers of moral ambiguity that had haunted my quieter moments ever since. My phone buzzed softly, a message from Marcus Chen. "Surveillance confirms regular meetings between Target and Diana Collins at Garden House. Audio impossible due to signal jammers recently installed. Diana Collins made 3 visits to City Hall this month, always after hours. Paper trail shows she's recently reactivated her law license." Diana Collins. The mayor's ex-wife was one of the most formidable corporate lawyers on the East Coast before their divorce 3 years ago. She'd vanished from public life afterward, allegedly due to a nervous breakdown. Now she was meeting with my wife in secret, discussing old patents and hidden evidence. I slipped out of bed and made my way to my study, the house creaking with familiar sounds that suddenly felt ominous. Opening my private safe, I retrieved a small black notebook, the only record of those tumultuous early days. As I flipped through its pages, my hands trembled at the implications. If Emma was investigating the Richardson case, she'd eventually discover that the patent dispute wasn't just about intellectual property. It was about a death that had never been properly explained. A soft noise made me freeze. Through my study's window, I caught a glimpse of movement in the garden. A figure dressed in black was moving toward the garden house, their gait familiar yet strange. Emma's silhouette, but not her usual confident stride. She was limping slightly, favoring her right leg, an injury I hadn't noticed, hadn't been told about. When had my wife started keeping even physical pain a secret from me? The garden house light flickered on, and for a moment, I saw 3 shadows instead of one. Emma wasn't alone in her midnight venture, and somehow that seemed more terrifying than any revelation so far. In the dim light, I could make out Diana Collins' distinctive profile, but the third figure remained tantalizingly out of view. I reached for my phone to text Marcus, but stopped short when I saw a new email in my inbox. The sender, Peter Richardson's widow, Sarah. Subject line: The truth about that night. The timestamp read 11:58 p.m. She was awake too, somewhere out there in the darkness, finally ready to speak about the night that had changed everything. The night that had set this whole machinery of secrets and lies into motion. Sarah Richardson's email sat unopened in my inbox, its presence pulsing like a wound. Through the study window, I watched the garden house lights extinguish one by one, shadows melting into darkness. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with the weight of 13 years of guilt. The memories rushed back unbidden. Peter Richardson's face that final day in my office, his eyes wild with a desperate kind of knowing. "You can't build an empire on stolen dreams, Nathan," he'd said, voice cracking. "The truth has a way of surfacing, like a body in water." 3 days later, his sailboat was found drifting empty in the bay, the investigation concluding with a too-neat bow of accidental drowning. Now, watching Emma's silhouette move through our garden like a stranger, I remembered how she'd held me the night we received news of Peter's death. She'd been my anchor then, steady and sure, whispering promises of better days ahead. Had she known even then? Had those comforting embraces been lined with calculation? The sound of the French doors opening downstairs pulled me from my reverie. I made my way to the kitchen, deliberate steps masked by the thick carpet. Emma stood at the marble island, her back to me, shoulders rigid with tension I'd never noticed before. A bruise peeked out from beneath her sleeve, dark, fresh, definitely not there this morning. "Trouble sleeping?" I kept my voice neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. She startled, turning quickly. For a fraction of a second, her face showed raw fear before smoothing into practiced calm. "Just needed some water," she said, but her glass remained unfilled. Her hand trembled as she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing another mark near her collarbone. "Those are new," I said quietly, nodding toward the bruises. Something flickered in her eyes, a desperate plea or a warning, I couldn't tell which. "I've taken up kickboxing," she said, the lie falling between us like broken glass. "You know how clumsy I can be." In 15 years of marriage, I'd never known Emma to be clumsy. She'd been a dancer in college, her movements always precise, controlled. Now she stood before me like a cornered animal, her carefully constructed facade cracking at the edges. My phone buzzed again, Marcus's update. Third figure identified: Robert Walsh, ex-military, current head of Mayor Collins' private security. Known for handling sensitive matters off the books. The pieces shifted again, forming a darker picture. Was Emma being coerced? Or was this another layer of deception, a carefully orchestrated performance to lower my guard? "Nathan," Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Do you ever think about Peter? About what really happened that night?" Our eyes met across the kitchen island, years of shared secrets and unspoken truths hanging in the balance. In that moment, I realized that uncovering the truth might cost me more than just my marriage. It could destroy everything I'd built, everything I thought I knew about myself. The unopened email from Sarah Richardson seemed to pulse stronger, a digital heartbeat counting down to revelations I might not be ready to face. Sarah Richardson's email burned in my inbox until dawn, its unopened presence a testament to my cowardice. As morning light filtered through the study windows, I finally clicked it open, my hands trembling like autumn leaves in the wind. "Nathan, I've kept this silence for 13 years, watching you build your empire on the foundation of my husband's grave. But something's changed. Someone's asking questions, the right questions." She came to me last month, her eyes filled with the same determination Peter had that last day. "Your wife. She knows, Nathan. Or at least, she's close to knowing. But here's what she doesn't know yet: Peter didn't just discover your patent theft. He found something else. Something in the company's early financial records. Do you remember that night in the boathouse? The conversation you had with James Collins before he was mayor? Peter recorded everything. The thumb drive still exists. And now there are people looking for it who are willing to do anything to find it. Protect Emma. She doesn't understand the depth of the water she's swimming in. Sarah. The words blurred as memories flooded back. That rain-soaked night at the boathouse, James Collins' younger, hungrier face in the shadows, words spoken in desperate whispers about campaign financing and shell companies. I'd convinced myself it was necessary, that the end justified the means. Cedar Grove needed changing, and change required power. Power required money. Money required compromise. My phone lit up with another message from Marcus. Walsh spotted entering mayor's office at 5 a.m. carrying thick file. Collins arrived 10 minutes later. Meeting still ongoing. The pieces were realigning themselves like a kaleidoscope of betrayal. Emma's bruises. Diana Collins' sudden reappearance. The mayor's increasing interest in our personal lives. Had Emma stumbled onto something bigger than just old patent disputes? Was she being threatened, or was she gathering ammunition? I made my way to our bedroom, where Emma slept fitfully, her face troubled even in repose. A strand of her hair had fallen across her cheek, and for a moment, I saw her as she'd been in our Stanford days, brilliant, fierce, uncompromising in her ideals. When had we both started making compromises we couldn't take back? Her phone lay on the nightstand, screen dark but unlocked, a deliberate move so unlike her usual cautious nature that it had to be intentional. The last open message glowed softly. Everything in place. Remember, he mustn't suspect until it's too late. Your safety depends on it. DC. My throat tightened with an emotion I couldn't name. Was I watching my wife being drawn into a dangerous game, or was she playing one of her own? The thumb drive Sarah mentioned could destroy not just me, but the entire power structure of Cedar Grove. And somewhere in this web of lies and old secrets, the truth about Peter Richardson's death waited like a time bomb. I reached for Emma's sleeping form, then stopped myself. The space between us on the bed felt like an ocean of unspoken words, each wave carrying whispers of either salvation or damnation. In her sleep, she murmured something that sounded like, "I'm sorry," but I couldn't tell if it was meant for me, for Peter, or for whatever was coming next. Morning arrived with the weight of unspoken words. I watched Emma's morning routine through new eyes, the careful application of concealer over her bruises, the slight tremor in her hands as she fastened her pearl necklace. Memories of our early mornings at Stanford flickered through my mind, Emma in warm pajamas, hair tousled, laughing over burnt toast and dreams too big for our tiny apartment. When had we stopped sharing our fears? "I have a board meeting this morning," I said, breaking the practiced silence between us. "Would you join me for dinner tonight? Just the two of us." Something flickered in her eyes, fear? Hope? Before disappearing behind her polished facade. "Of course, darling." Her voice carried that new brittleness, like thin ice over deep water. "The Italian place downtown? I was thinking here. Maria can prepare your favorite risotto." I watched her reaction carefully, noting how her fingers tightened around her coffee cup at the mention of our housekeeper's name. "Home sounds perfect," she replied, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. As she gathered her things to leave, I noticed her hand lingering on her phone, thumb hovering over what looked like a message draft. The day passed in a blur of meetings and forced normalcy, but my mind kept returning to Sarah's email. The thumb drive. The boathouse conversation. James Collins' ambitious dreams of reshaping Cedar Grove. Every memory now felt tainted, viewed through the lens of present suspicions. Marcus sent periodic updates throughout the day. Diana Collins spotted entering federal building downtown. Walsh made 3 calls to offshore numbers. Mrs. Thompson's car parked at City Hall for 47 minutes. Left looking distressed. By evening, our dining room felt like a stage set for a Greek tragedy. Emma sat across from me, beautiful in a navy dress I'd never seen before, the candlelight casting shadows that danced across her face like secrets given form. The bruise near her collarbone had darkened, a purple reminder of questions I was afraid to ask. "Do you remember?" she said suddenly, her voice soft but intent. "That night at the Stanford Library? When we talked about changing the world?" The memory hit me with physical force. Emma surrounded by law books, passionate about corporate accountability and ethical technology. She challenged my shortcuts then, pushed me toward a better version of myself. When had I stopped listening? You said something that night, she continued, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. About power being a responsibility, not a right. About how technology should serve truth, not bury it. Her eyes met mine, filled with an emotion I couldn't decipher. I've been thinking about truth lately, Nathan. About the weight of secrets, and the cost of keeping them. The air between us grew thick with unspoken accusations and desperate pleas. Outside, a car drove past slowly, Walsh's black SUV, its presence both threat and witness to whatever was unfolding between us. Emma, I started, my voice rough with emotion. If you're in trouble. Aren't we all? She interrupted, her smile sad and knowing. In trouble, I mean. When we build our lives on foundations we know might crumble? She stood gracefully, but I caught the slight wince as she moved. I need to freshen up, she said, but her path to the bathroom took her past my study, where Sarah's email still waited on my computer screen. I watched her go, wondering if I was witnessing an elaborate performance, or a cry for help. The thumb drive that could destroy everything was out there somewhere, and with it, the truth about Peter Richardson's last night alive. But suddenly, watching my wife disappear down our hallway like a ghost of her former self, I realized there might be worse things to lose than an empire built on lies. In the moments after Emma left the dining room, I found myself staring at her half-empty wine glass, the lipstick mark on its rim a perfect crescent moon of burgundy secrets. The candlelight caught the fine tremor in my hands as I reached for my own glass, memories washing over me like waves of autumn rain. The soft click of her heels on hardwood echoed through our home, but not toward the bathroom. Instead, they traced a path to my study, each step a heartbeat of hesitation and purpose. I waited, breath suspended, as silence settled over the house like dust on forgotten photographs. When I finally followed, I found her standing before my computer, her silhouette carved in moonlight from the window. Sarah's email glowed on the screen, casting shadows across Emma's face that made her look both younger and infinitely more tired than I'd ever seen her. I wondered when Sarah would reach out, she said without turning, her voice carrying the weight of mountains. She came to me first, 3 months ago. Showed me pictures of Peter's sailboat, the rope marks on the railing that the police report never mentioned. The air between us grew thick with decades of unspoken truths. I watched her shoulders rise and fall with carefully controlled breaths, noticed how her fingers pressed against the desk as if seeking anchor in a storm. Why didn't you come to me? The question escaped before I could stop it, raw and desperate. Emma turned then, and the look in her eyes stripped away years of carefully constructed facades. The same reason you never told me what really happened that night at the boathouse, she whispered. Because sometimes love means protecting someone from truths that could destroy them. These bruises, I gestured helplessly toward her collarbone, Walsh, are not what you think, she interrupted, a flash of the old Emma breaking through, fierce, protective. James Collins isn't just looking for a thumb drive, Nathan. He's orchestrating something bigger. The tech summit next month, the foreign investors, the rezoning projects, it's all connected. Diana's been helping me gather evidence, build a case. But Walsh. Her voice trembled slightly. Walsh discovered what we were doing. The bruises are a warning, not just to me, but to everyone involved. I moved toward her, muscle memory of 15 years drawing me like gravity, but she held up a hand to stop me. Don't, she said softly. Not until you understand everything. I found something in the old financial records, Nathan. About the real source of your initial funding. About why Peter had to die. The words hung between us like shattered glass, each fragment reflecting a different version of our shared past. Through the window, Walsh's SUV still idled in the darkness, its presence a reminder that this night would end in either truth or tragedy. Show me, I said finally, my voice rough with emotion I couldn't name. Emma's hand trembled as she reached into her purse, withdrawing a small silver thumb drive that caught the moonlight like a blade. Once you see this, she whispered, Everything changes. Are you ready for that? In that moment, looking at my wife's face transformed by shadows and secrets, I realized that the answer would redefine not just our marriage, but the very foundation of everything we built together in Cedar Grove. The thumb drive felt impossibly small in my palm, this tiny vessel of truth that could sink an empire. Emma's perfume, usually so familiar, seemed suddenly strange in the moonlit study, mixing with the scent of old books and older secrets. Her hands shook as she reached for my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard like a pianist about to strike a devastating chord. "Before I show you this," she whispered, her voice carrying echoes of countless intimate moments we'd shared in this very room, "I need you to understand something. I didn't go looking for this truth, Nathan. It found me, like a ghost that wouldn't rest." The computer's soft hum filled the silence between us as she inserted the drive. Files populated the screen, financial records, emails, photographs. But what caught my eye was a video file dated the night of Peter's death. My throat constricted as Emma double-clicked it, bringing the past roaring into our present like a storm. The footage was grainy, shot from what appeared to be a security camera at the marina. I watched myself walking with James Collins along the dock, our younger selves caught in eternal digital amber. The audio was poor, but the words cut through time with crystal clarity. "The Chinese investors are getting nervous, Nathan. If Richardson talks about the source of the initial funding, he won't." My voice from the past, harder than I remembered being. "I'll handle Peter." Emma paused the video, her finger trembling on the touchpad. "There's more," she said softly. "But I needed you to see this first. To understand why I've been." She gestured vaguely at herself, at the bruises, at the elaborate dance of deception she'd been performing. "The money that built Thompson Technologies," she continued, her words careful as footsteps through a minefield. "It wasn't just about patent theft, was it? The Chinese investors, the shell companies, the way Peter died." Her eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of love and horror that made my chest ache. "James Collins helped you launder money for the triads, didn't he? That's how you both rose to power. That's why Peter had to disappear." The truth hung between us like poison gas, seeping into every corner of our carefully constructed life. Outside, Walsh's SUV engine gunned suddenly, headlights sweeping across our window in a predatory arc. "Emma." I reached for her, but she stepped back, her movement a perfect metaphor for the distance 15 years of secrets had carved between us. Everything I did, every compromise, every decision, it was all to build something lasting. Something worthy of you. Of me? Her laugh held no mirth, only bone-deep sadness. "The girl you met at Stanford would never have wanted an empire built on blood money. But that's not why I'm showing you this now." She turned back to the computer, opening another file. "James Collins isn't just the mayor anymore, Nathan. He's running for governor. And he's planning to sacrifice you to get there." The documents on screen showed a complex web of evidence, all pointing toward me, absolving Collins of any involvement. My name on transfer documents, my signature on contracts, my face on security footage. A perfect paper trail of damnation. "Diana's been helping me build a counter case," Emma said, her voice stronger now. "We've been gathering proof of Collins' involvement, trying to protect you. The bruises." She touched her collarbone gently. "Walsh caught me copying files from Collins' private safe. But I couldn't stop, Nathan. Not when I knew what they were planning to do to you." The irony struck me like a physical blow. My wife, whom I'd suspected of betrayal, had actually been fighting a shadow war to save me from my own past sins. The weight of it all pressed against my chest like a stone, love, guilt, gratitude, and terror, all tangled together in an impossible knot. The truths shattered like a mirror in that moonlit study, each fragment reflecting a different kind of betrayal. As Emma reached to open another file, her sleeve rolled up, revealing something that made my blood freeze, not a bruise, but a small tattoo. 3 dots in a triangle formation, barely visible against her pale skin. The same mark I'd seen in photographs of high-ranking triad members during my early dealings in China. Suddenly, memories rearranged themselves like pieces in a kaleidoscope. Emma at Stanford, fluent in Mandarin before we met. Her father's mysterious international business connections. The way she guided my early business decisions with surprising insight into Chinese markets. How long? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. How long have you been working for them? Emma's hands stilled on the keyboard. When she turned to face me, her expression had transformed, the vulnerability replaced by something ancient and calculating. Since before Stanford, she said quietly. My father wasn't just a businessman, Nathan. He was their financial architect in the West. I was raised to follow in his footsteps. The weight of this revelation threatened to crush my chest. Our entire marriage was arranged, she finished, her voice carrying an emotion I couldn't decipher. They needed someone to oversee their tech investment in America. Someone who could build a legitimate empire while maintaining their interests. Her eyes met mine, filled with a complex mixture of genuine pain and calculated purpose. They chose you. I was assigned to make sure you succeeded, and to ensure your loyalty. The room seemed to spin. Every memory of our life together now carried a double edge, her encouragement of my ambitions, her subtle guidance in key decisions, her network of connections that had opened so many doors. Even Peter Richardson's death took on a new dimension. But Walsh, the bruises. I struggled to reconcile this new reality with what I'd witnessed. Are real, she said, touching her collarbone. Because something changed, Nathan. I did the unforgivable. Her voice cracked slightly. I fell in love with you. Really loved you. And when I discovered Colin's plan to sacrifice you, I chose you over my duty. Outside, Walsh's SUV's engine roared to life. Emma's face paled. They know I've betrayed them. Collins isn't just running for governor. He's their new chosen overseer. My punishment was to help destroy you, to dismantle everything we built together. When I refused. A sharp crack split the air, a bullet through our study window. Emma moved with practiced grace, pulling me down behind the desk. Her movements were no longer those of a corporate wife, but of someone trained for moments like this. I never lied about loving you, she whispered as glass rained around us. That's why I had to show you the truth. They're coming for both of us now. In that moment, as sirens wailed in the distance and footsteps approached our study, I realized that every assumption I'd made about victim and villain, about protector and betrayer, had been devastatingly wrong. The woman beside me was both my greatest deception and my only ally in surviving what was coming next. Another bullet whistled through the shattered window, embedding itself in the leather-bound volumes of my father's old law books. In the chaos of breaking glass and splintering wood, I found myself studying Emma's face, really studying it, as if seeing her for the first time. The practiced grace of her movements, the steel in her eyes that I'd always attributed to her corporate prowess, now revealed their true origin. The cellar, she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. There's a passage I had built when we first moved in. Standard protocol for. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. As we crawled across the study floor, memories flickered through my mind like an old film reel with new context. Our first meeting at Stanford, not chance, but calculated. Her father's sudden approval of our marriage despite his initial resistance. The way she'd always seemed to know exactly what to say during critical business negotiations. All those nights you held me after Peter's death. I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Was that part of the protocol too? She paused at the cellar door, her fingers trembling slightly on the hidden latch. In the dim light, I caught a glimpse of something raw and vulnerable in her expression. Those nights were real, she whispered. That's when I began to hate myself for what I was doing to you. What I was part of. The cellar door opened to reveal a narrow passage I'd never known existed in my own home. As Emma led me through the darkness, her hand firm in mine, the sound of footsteps echoed from above. Walsh's voice carried through the floorboards. Find them. Collins wants this cleaned up before midnight. Why now? I asked as we navigated the tunnel. After 15 years, why risk everything to protect me? Emma's grip tightened. Because 6 months ago, I found something in Colin's private files. Something worse than the money laundering, worse than Peter's death. She paused, checking another hidden panel. They're not just using Thompson Technologies for cleaning Triad money anymore. Collins has been using our AI development division to create deepfake technology for political manipulation. The gubernatorial race is just the beginning. They're planning to reshape the entire West Coast power structure. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Our company's latest AI breakthroughs, the ones I'd been so proud of, weren't just about facial recognition and security systems. They were weapons being forged in a shadow war I hadn't even known I was fighting. But that's not why I chose you. Emma continued, her voice catching. 2 months ago, I discovered I was pregnant. I couldn't let our child be born into this web of lies. Couldn't let them control another generation. The tunnel ended at what appeared to be an old storm drain. As Emma worked to open the rusted gate, I processed this final revelation. A child. A future. A truth that transformed everything yet again. Suddenly, a light flooded the tunnel from behind us. Mrs. Thompson. Walsh's voice echoed off the concrete walls. Your father sends his regards. Emma's face went pale. Nathan, run. The gate's unlocked. I'll hold them. I cut her off, pulling her through the gate with me. No more sacrifices, I said firmly. No more secrets. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The sound of pursuit grew closer as we emerged into the rain-soaked night. Somewhere in the darkness, sirens wailed, but whether they were coming to save us or silence us remained to be seen. The child Emma carried represented both our greatest vulnerability and our only chance at redemption. In that moment, as we ran through the shadows of the city we'd helped build on lies, I realized that love, real love, wasn't about perfect truth or complete deception. Sometimes it was about choosing to believe in someone even after discovering they'd been trained their entire life to deceive you. The rain-slicked streets of Cedar Grove blurred past us as we fled through the darkness, each streetlight casting momentary halos that illuminated Emma's face and strobing glimpses of fear and determination. We managed to lose Walsh temporarily in the maze of old storm drains, but the night held one more revelation that would shatter whatever fragile trust remained between us. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus with an attachment. Security footage from City Hall, private elevator, 3 weeks ago. You need to see this. I shouldn't have opened it there, running through the rain with sirens wailing in the distance. But sometimes the need for truth overwhelms all reason. The video played, grainy but clear enough to stop my heart. Emma and James Collins, locked in an intimate embrace. Her hands in his hair, his lips on her neck, their bodies pressed against the elevator wall with familiar urgency. Stop. My voice came out as a whisper, but Emma froze as if I'd shouted. The rain drummed against the pavement between us, each drop another accusation. Nathan. Her face crumpled with genuine anguish as she saw the video playing on my phone. It's not. Don't. The word felt like glass in my throat. Don't say it's not what it looks like. I've heard enough lies tonight. The distance between us seemed to stretch into miles, though we stood mere feet apart. Every touch, every whispered intimacy of the past 15 years suddenly felt tainted by this new betrayal. The pregnancy she just revealed, was it even mine? I had to, she whispered, her voice breaking. Collins was growing suspicious. He needed to believe he had complete control over me, over us. The affair. She swallowed hard, rain streaming down her face like tears. Or perhaps they were tears. It was the only way to get close enough to access his private files, to find the evidence about the AI program and the political manipulation. How long? The question burned like acid. 6 weeks. Her answer came too quickly, too precisely, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Every moment felt like a betrayal, not just of our marriage, but of everything I'd come to believe in. Every time he touched me, I thought of you, of our baby, of the future we could have if I could just find enough evidence to bring him down. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the rain. Headlights swept the street as black SUVs appeared at both ends of the alley. We were trapped, But in that moment, the physical danger seemed distant compared to the emotional chasm between us. I never loved him, Emma continued desperately, her hand protectively covering her stomach. Everything else I told you tonight was true, about my father, the triads, falling in love with you for real. This was just the final sacrifice I had to make to protect you, to protect our child from the world I was born into. Walsh's voice carried through a megaphone. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Thompson. The mayor would like a word. In that moment, looking at Emma's face transformed by rain and desperation, I realized that truth and deception weren't opposites, but rather shades of the same complex reality. The woman before me had been trained since birth to deceive, yet had chosen to risk everything, her position, her safety, even her dignity, to protect what we'd built together. The question was, could love survive such calculated betrayal, even when the betrayal itself was an act of desperate love? The rain seemed to slow around us, each drop suspended in the amber glow of street lights like frozen tears. I found myself studying Emma's face, not the face of the Triad princess or the calculating spy, but the face I'd woken up to for 15 years. The slight crease between her brows when she was worried, the tremor in her lower lip she could never quite control when she was afraid. How many of these little tells had been real, and how many had been carefully crafted performances? Your father, I said quietly, even as Walsh's men moved into position around us. Did he order the affair with Collins? A flash of raw pain crossed her face. No, she whispered. That was my choice. The ultimate proof of loyalty to Collins, to get access to what we needed. My father. Her voice caught. My father died 3 months ago. Heart attack in a Hong Kong prison. The organization blamed his arrest on Collins' growing carelessness. That's when I learned about the AI program, about Collins' real ambitions. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. So this was revenge? It started as revenge, she admitted, her hands still protectively cradling her stomach. But then I found out about the baby. Discovered what they planned to do with our AI technology. Realized that Collins wasn't just using me. He was planning to use our child as leverage, to ensure the next generation of control. Her eyes met mine, brimming with a truth more painful than any lie. Everything changed when I saw that first ultrasound. Suddenly, all the layers of duty and deception didn't matter anymore. I just wanted our child to be free. Walsh's men were closing in, their weapons trained on us. The night air crackled with tension and unspoken threats. But in that moment, all I could see was Emma on our wedding day, her smile genuine despite the manufactured circumstances that had brought us together. All those small moments of real joy, of authentic connection, floating like islands in a sea of orchestrated deception. The baby. I managed, my voice rough. Is it yours? She said firmly, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. I may have shared Colin's bed, but I made sure. She swallowed hard. I made sure there was no chance. I couldn't bear the thought of carrying his child. Some lies we tell to survive, Nathan, but some truths we protect with our lives. The SUV's headlights caught the tears streaming down her face, transforming them into diamonds of regret. Behind us, Walsh's footsteps approached with mechanical inevitability. In front of us, Collins himself emerged from a vehicle, his mayoral smile twisted into something predatory. Time to end this charade, Collins called out, his voice carrying the weight of political speeches and boardroom victories. Though I must admit, Emma, you played your part beautifully. In every way. The crude insinuation hung in the rain-soaked air between us. I watched Emma's face transform, not with shame, but with a cold fury that reminded me she was both victim and warrior in this game of power and betrayal. In that moment, I understood that sometimes the deepest love expresses itself through the most painful sacrifices. The question wasn't whether I could forgive her. The question was whether we would survive the next few minutes to have the chance to rebuild what had been broken. The world narrowed to a pinpoint of clarity in that rain-soaked moment. Collins stood before us, flanked by his men, his expensive suit darkening with rain. Behind us, Walsh's footsteps drew closer, each splash against puddles marking the diminishing distance between survival and destruction. But all I could focus on was Emma's hand, still protectively curved over her stomach, over our child, the one true thing in a universe of lies. "You know what fascinates me, Nathan?" Collins called out, his politician's voice carrying over the rain. "How a man as brilliant as you never saw it. The arranged marriage, the convenient business connections, the perfect wife who supported every ambition." He laughed, the sound empty of warmth. "Though I must say, her support was particularly thorough these past weeks." I felt Emma tense beside me, but her voice when it came was steady, filled with a quiet power I'd never fully appreciated before. "Are you done, James? Done playing with people's lives like they're pieces on your board?" She took a step forward, and in that movement, I saw not the society wife I'd known, but the warrior she'd been trained to be. "You forgot something crucial. Something my father taught me before your friends arranged his arrest. The most dangerous player isn't the one with the most pieces, it's the one with nothing left to lose." Her hand moved, quick as lightning, pulling something from her sleeve. A small remote detonator, its red light pulsing like a heartbeat in the rain. "The AI servers," she said calmly. "The ones running your deepfake program? I planted charges 2 weeks ago. Right after one of our meetings." The word dripped with disgust. "One press, and all your evidence, all your plans for political manipulation, everything, it burns." Colin's smile faltered for the first time. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't destroy your husband's company. The company is already compromised," I found myself saying, stepping forward to stand beside Emma. "But we can rebuild. Start clean. Some things matter more than empires." The night air crackled with tension as Collins assessed us, his political instincts weighing options, calculating risks. In his hesitation, I saw his weakness. He never understood love as anything but a tool for manipulation. He couldn't comprehend sacrificing power for something as intangible as redemption. "Kill them," he ordered finally, mask of civility dropping entirely. "Kill them both." What happened next unfolded like a deadly ballet. Emma's finger pressed the detonator as she twisted, pushing me toward a narrow alley. In the distance, explosions lit up the night sky where our company's server farm stood. Walsh's men opened fire, but Emma moved with lethal grace, her years of training evident in every motion. My own security team, led by Marcus, emerged from the shadows where they'd been waiting, my one last card to play. In the chaos that followed, as bullets sparked against brick and sirens wailed closer, I caught glimpses of truths and lies blending into something new. Emma, fierce and protective, every deception she'd crafted now turned toward our survival. The evidence we'd gathered, backed up and sent to every major news outlet, would destroy Colin's political aspirations and expose the corruption that had fueled Cedar Grove's transformation. Hours later, as dawn broke over the city we built and nearly destroyed, I found Emma in the safe house Marcus had prepared. She stood by the window, one hand still resting on her stomach, her face painted in shades of gold by the rising sun. "I grew up surrounded by lies," she said softly, not turning around. "Trained to believe love was weakness, truth was relative, and power was the only reality that mattered. But loving you," her voice caught, "loving you taught me that some truths are worth any sacrifice." I moved to stand beside her, watching our city wake to a new reality. The wreckage of our past lay behind us, the burnt servers, Collins in custody, the exposed corruption. But ahead lay something rarer than power, more valuable than empire, the chance to build something real from the ashes of what had been built on lies. "The baby," Emma whispered, finally turning to face me. "I want him or her to know only truth. No matter how painful, no matter how hard. Will you help me?" In her eyes I saw all the layers of who she was, the trained deceiver, the protective mother, the woman who had chosen love over duty. And I realized that perhaps the deepest truth is this: we are all composed of light and shadow, of love and lies, of what we were trained to be and what we choose to become. "Yes," I said simply, taking her hand. Together. The sun rose fully over Cedar Grove, washing away the shadows of our past, illuminating the path toward a future built not on perfect truth, for such a thing rarely exists, but on the complex, messy, beautiful reality of choosing each other, every day, despite knowing the worst, because of witnessing the best.